If you're watching this, dim the lights, take a deep breath, and prepare yourself. What you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a descent into the unknown. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss what lies ahead. Ready, let's begin. The Nautilus floated on the surface of the Pacific Ocean, a stark white speck against the endless gray expanse. Inside the ship, the air buzzed with excitement and just a hint of tension. Dr. Ian Lane, the mission leader, stood at the helm of the operations deck, gazing at the screen in front of him. Rows of data scrolled across it, accompanied by grainy sonar images of the trench they were about to explore. His voice carried an edge of anticipation as he addressed the crew. We're about to make history, people. This trench is deeper than anything ever mapped. No one has been this far down. We're venturing into a world that hasn't been touched for millions of years. Emily, his assistant, glanced at the screen from her station, her brows furrowed in concern. And there might be a reason no one's been here, Adrian. The readings are strange. Strange is good. Adrian replied, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Strange is why we're here. Marcus, the pilot, leaned back in his chair, grinning. Come on, Emily. It's just another hole in the ocean. We've got the best tech money can buy. We'll be fine. Emily didn't look convinced. The pressure down there is beyond anything we've designed for. The sub's reinforced, but what if it's not enough? Relax, Marcus said, spinning his chair to face her. You think too much. Besides, if anything happens, I'm pretty sure I can outswim whatever's down there. Marcus, this isn't a joke. Emily snapped, her voice sharp. This is the deep ocean. It doesn't care about your confidence. Adrian stepped in, raising a hand to calm them. Enough. Let's stay professional. We've got a mission, and we're prepared. Let's not waste energy second-guessing ourselves. The submersible, Abyss Explorer, loomed in the open bay, its sleek design gleaming under the ship's lights. The crew gathered around it, each member checking their gear with practiced precision. Adrian spoke up as they prepared to board. Remember, we're not just here to observe. We're here to document, to collect, to uncover what's been hidden. This is the cutting edge of science, and you're all part of it. Let's make it count. As the submersible was lowered into the ocean, the team settled into their station. The descent began smoothly, the water outside shifting from pale blue to inky black as they plunged deeper. Depth in 5,000 feet. Marcus announced, his voice steady. Emily kept her eyes on the instruments. Pressure levels are stable. Temperatures dropping as expected. Adrian leaned forward, his gaze fixed on the sonar screen. Keep an eye on that signal. We don't want any surprises. Minutes turned into hours as the Abyss Explorer descended. The silence inside the sub was broken only by the hum of machinery and the occasional beep of the monitors. Then the first anomaly appeared, sonars picking up something. Emily said, her voice tense. It's moving. Marcus frowned. Moving how, like a school of fish? No, Emily replied, shaking her head. It's bigger, a lot bigger. Adrian adjusted the controls, zooming in on the sonar display. A faint, amorphous shape flickered on the screen, growing larger as they approached. Could be a thermal vent, Adrian suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. Or an underwater current. Thermal vents don't move like this, Emily muttered. The shape disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only an eerie stillness. Depth 10,000 feet, Marcus reported. Lights on, Adrian ordered. The exterior floodlights activated, cutting through the darkness and revealing the trench walls. A jagged, alien landscape that seemed to pulse with an almost organic quality. It's beautiful, Emily whispered, her fear momentarily forgotten. The moment of wonder was shattered when the sonar emitted a high-pitched wail. What the hell? Marcus muttered, frantically adjusting the controls. The system's glitching. Emily's voice was tight. That's not a glitch. That's something moving. Fast. A faint glow appeared ahead, pulsing rhythmically. It grew brighter as they approached, illuminating the trench walls in flashes of red and gold. What is that? Adrian asked, his voice barely audible. The glow flickered and then resolved into a cluster of lights, eyes. Massive, unblinking eyes that stared directly at the sub. Emily's breath caught.
Are those it alive?
Before anyone could answer, the sub lurched violently, crowing the crew against their restraints. Something's pulling us! Marcus shouted, wrestling with the controls. The glowing eyes vanished, replaced by an overwhelming darkness that seemed to press against the sub like a living thing. Adrian's voice cut through the chaos.
Stabilize us, Marcus, now. I'm trying.
Marcus yelled, sweat dripping down his face. The lights flickered, and a deep, resonant sound filled the sub. A sound that felt more like a presence than a noise. Emily clutched her headset, her voice shaking. This isn't natural. Adrian, we need to abort. No, Adrian snapped. We're too close. We can't turn back now. The sub shook again, harder this time. The glowing eyes reappeared, closer than before, and a chilling realization setting they weren't just watching. They were waiting. The Abyss Explorer continued its descent, the lights on its exterior cutting through the endless black like a blade. Inside, the crew sat in a tense silence as Emily adjusted the sonar settings. It's not behaving like any marine life we've seen, she said, her voice low. The movement. It's erratic, like it's circling us. Adrian leaned closer to the monitor, his brow furrowed. Could it be a malfunction? Interference from the trench walls? Marcus chuckled nervously. Interference or not, it's creeping me out. Let's hope it's just a curious squid. The sonar let out a soft ping, followed by another, then another. Faster now. Emily's eyes darted across the screen. Knock, it's not one thing. It's multiple objects, and they're closing in. A heavy silence filled the cabin. Adrian straightened, his tone sharp.
How many? Emily hesitated. 5.
Knock, 6. They rep too large to be fish, and their speed. The sub suddenly shuddered. A metallic groan echoed through the cabin, causing everyone to grab their seats. What the hell was that? Marcus shouted, gripping the controls. Emily frantically checked the instruments.
Something's outside. It brushed past us. Pressure spike detected.
Adrian's voice was calm but firm. Steady. Marcus, keep us descending. We stick to the plan. The sub's exterior cameras flickered on the screen, showing only the murky void of the trench. Then, for a split second, something moved past the lens. A shadow, long and sinuous, disappearing into the black. Marcus cursed under his breath. Did you see that? Tell me I'm not imagining things. Adrian's eyes narrowed. You're not. Everyone, stay focused. We've trained for unknowns. Emily recorded everything. The tension was thick as they passed the 10,000-foot mark. The sub's lights reflected off jagged rock formations, and the water seemed to grow denser, almost alive with movement. Emily gasped as a new image appeared on the monitor. There's a structure below us. Adrian froze. A structure? That's impossible. We're in the middle of the Pacific. There shouldn't be anything man-made down here. It's not man-made, Emily whispered. The image on the sonar was unmistakable. Perfectly symmetrical spires rising from the sea, their shapes unnatural and precise. Marcus shook his head. That's gotta be a glitch. Rocks don't grow like that. Emily zoomed in, her voice trembling. It's no glitch. Look at the alignment. It's a grid, like a city. Adrian's voice turned cold. Keep descending. I want a closer look. The sub adjusted its trajectory, the lights now illuminating the spires below. As they neared, the shapes became clearer. Towering obelisks covered in strange glowing symbols. The light wasn't reflected, it was emanating from the structures themselves, casting the surrounding water in an eerie greenish hue. The hum started then. At first, it was faint, a low vibration that seemed to pulse through the sub's hold. Marcus winced, covering his ears. What is that? Is it coming from the spires? Emily's face was pale. It's resonating in a pattern, like a signal. Adrian leaned toward the intercom, his voice sharp. Emily, is this sound harmful? Are we at risk? Emily shook her head quickly, scanning the monitors. No, it's not harming us, but it's changing. The frequency, it's rising. The sound grew louder, more insistent. The lights inside the sub flickered, and the temperature gauges began to spike. Pressure's increasing faster than it should at this depth. Emily shouted, "We need to stabilize!" Before Adrian could respond, the sub lurched violently to the side. Alarms blared, and the screens flashed red. Marcus fought with the controls, his knuckles white. Something's pulling us! It's dragging us toward the spires! Outside, the camera feed showed the tendrils, black fluid shapes snaking out from the base of the spires, wrapping around the submersible. They moved with purpose, tightening their grip. Cut the lights, Adrian ordered. It might release us if it thinks we're dead. Marcus hesitated but flipped the switch. The cabin plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the glowing spires outside. The hum slowed, growing deeper and more deliberate. It's not stopping, Emily whispered. Then, a voice crackled through the static of the radio, a deep, guttural sound, speaking in a language none of them could understand. Marcus's voice wavered. Did anyone else just hear that? Adrian's expression darkened. That wasn't us. That was something else. The sub jerked violently, pulling the crew against their restraints. The spires loomed closer, their symbols now pulsating in rapid, hypnotic tech patterns. The hum turned into a deafening roar, as if the ocean itself was alive and furious. Adrian gritted his teeth, his voice a growl. Brace yourselves. Whatever happens next, we stay together. The tendrils tightened their grip, and the sub was dragged into the heart of the glowing spires. Darkness swallowed them whole. The hum grew louder, more insistent, vibrating through the hull of the submersible. It wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling crawling under their skin, wrapping around their thoughts. The lights on the strange obelisks below seemed to pulse in time with it, creating a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. Adrian's voice cut through the tension. Emily, can you isolate that signal? Figure out what's broadcasting it. Emily's hands moved swiftly over the controls, but her eyes betrayed her uncertainty. I'm trying, but it's not like anything I've seen before. It's layered, like it's made to be heard, felt, and understood. Marcus glanced nervously at the viewport where the glowing spires loomed closer. Understood. By who? Or what? Suddenly, the hum shifted, becoming deeper, heavier, like a distant roar. The screens flickered, static filling the cabin. The sub trembled violently, throwing Emily against her console. Hold on! Marcus shouted, gripping the controls. The lights inside the sub dimmed as a shadow swept over them, massive and unmistakable. Something was out there, circling them. Did you see that? Marcus gasped, his knuckles white on the controls. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. It's bigger than the sub. Adrian's jaw tightened. Keep the cameras rolling. Whatever this is, we're documenting it. Stay focused. Outside, the water seemed to ripple unnaturally, bending light in impossible ways. The massive shadow circled again, just beyond the sub's illumination. Emily flipped through the external cameras, trying to get a clearer view, but all they caught were flashes of movement, impossibly fast, disturbingly fluid. Marcus muttered under his breath, "This is way above our pay grade." The hum abruptly ceased, leaving a deafening silence. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the absence of sound more unsettling than the noise itself. Then a voice broke through the static on the radio. It wasn't human. The tone was deep, resonant, like a chorus of voices speaking in unison. The words were unintelligible, but there was an undeniable sense of intent behind them. Emily stared at the monitor in horror. It's not just a signal, it's trying to communicate. Adrian's expression hardened. "Record everything. We're not running until we know what we're dealing with." Marcus slammed his fist on the console.
Are you insane? That thing out there, it's not some research subject. It's hunting us.
Before Adrian could respond, the sub jolted violently. Something had struck them, and hard. The cabin filled with the screech of metal under strain. Alarms blared, red lights flashing.
We're losing structural integrity,
Emily yelled.
The hull can't take much more of this.
Adrian grabbed the intercom.
Marcus, ascend now!
Marcus gritted his teeth, pulling the controls. The sub began to rise, but another impact sent it spiraling, slamming the crew into their seats. Through the viewport, they saw it, a massive serpentine shape, its glowing eyes fixed on the sub. It didn't move like a creature. It moved like the water itself had come alive, its form shifting and flowing in impossible ways. Emily's voice trembled. It's not just alive, it's intelligent. The creature lunged, wrapping its massive form around the sub. The lights flickered as the hull groaned under the pressure. The glowing symbols on the obelisks flared brighter, casting everything in an otherworldly light. Adrian shouted above the chaos.
Cut power to the lights! Maybe it'll lose interest!
Emily hesitated, then flipped the switches. Darkness engulfed the sub, broken only by the faint, pulsating glow from the obelisks below. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the creature released them. The sub drifted in the silence, the crew holding their breath. Marcus kept his hands on the controls, ready to bolt at Adrian's command. But before anyone could speak, the hum returned. Deeper, more resonant, vibrating through their bones. Adrian whispered, almost to himself, "It's not letting us leave." The obelisks began to shift, their positions changing like pieces on a chessboard. The glowing symbols rearranged themselves, forming patterns that pulsed in unison. The hum became a rhythm, a message impossible to ignore. Emily's voice was barely audible. "It's guiding us somewhere." Marcus shook his head vehemently. "No way. We're not following that thing." Adrian's gaze was fixed on the glowing spires. "We don't have a choice." The sub's controls lit up on their own, the thrusters engaging without Marcus's input. The craft began to descend, drawn deeper into the trench, toward a massive opening in the ocean floor that yawned like a mouth. Inside, the glow was blinding, the symbols dancing like living flames. The crew's protests faded into stunned silence as they crossed the threshold. And then, the lights went out. A list below. The creature paused, its massive, glowing eyes hovering just beyond the viewport. For a moment, everything was eerily still, the only sound the crew's ragged breathing. Then, the creature released the sub, its form dissolving into the dark waters. Marcus didn't wait for confirmation. He slammed the throttle forward, pushing the sub to ascend as fast as the damaged systems would allow. "We're getting out of here," Marcus growled, his hands trembling on the controls. Emily glanced at her monitors.
"Wait! The signal! It's still coming through! It's following us!"
Adrian leaned over her shoulder, his voice sharp.
"What do you mean following? The creature's gone!"
Emily shook her head. "No, not the creature. The signal. It's embedded in our systems, like it's inside the sub." Adrian's face paled. "Shut everything down except life support."
"Kill the comms, the cameras! Everything!"
Emily's fingers danced across the console, flipping switches and cutting power to non-essential systems. The cabin plunged into an unsettling quiet, the hum of machinery replaced by their pounding hearts. Marcus glanced nervously at the viewport, the faint glow of the obelisks fading into the distance as they ascended. "We're clear, right? It's over." Before anyone could answer, the sub shuddered violently. The lights flickered back on, though no one had touched the controls. Static hissed through the radio, building to a deafening crescendo. And then the voice returned. It was clear now, still incomprehensible, but layered with a tone that felt like a command. It wasn't just a sound, it resonated in their minds, pulling at their thoughts, their memories. Emily clutched her head, groaning. It's in my head! I can hear it, feel it!" Adrian grabbed her shoulders, shaking her. "Fight it! Whatever it is, don't let it in." Marcus let out a strangled cry, his hands flying off the controls. "Something's moving in the water! Look!" Through the viewport, faint shapes swirled in the darkness. Smaller than the first creature, but just as unnatural. They moved with the same fluid, impossible grace, surrounding the sub like a predatory pack. "They're everywhere," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. Emily stared at the screens, her fingers frozen over the controls. They're not just following us, they're hurting us. Adrian's eyes narrowed. To where? As if in answer, the sub jerked violently downward. The propulsion system sputtered and died, leaving them at the mercy of the current. The external lights flickered back on, illuminating a massive structure rising from the ocean floor. It wasn't natural. The architecture was alien, an intricate labyrinth of spires and towers carved from a black, glass-like material. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the walls, pulsing in rhythm with the hum that now filled the cabin once more. Marcus stared, wide-eyed. What is that? Adrian gritted his teeth. That's what they wanted us to find. The sub was pulled closer, the massive structure looming larger in the viewport. As they neared, the glowing symbols seemed to come alive, shifting and rearranging into patterns that defied logic. Emily whispered, her voice trembling. It's a message. They're trying to tell us something. Adrian shook his head. No, they're trying to trap us. The sub came to an abrupt halt, hovering just above a massive, circular entrance. The glowing symbols flared brightly, bathing the cabin in an eerie light. And then, the entrance began to open. A deep, guttural sound reverberated through the water as the circular door spiraled outward, revealing a cavernous interior. The light from within was blinding, a mix of crimson and gold that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Emily's hands moved to the controls. We have to get out of here! Now! Adrian grabbed her wrist, stopping her. No. If we try to run, they'll destroy us. This is what they want. We have to go inside. Marcus turned to him, incredulous. Are you insane? We go in there, we're dead. Adrian met his gaze, his expression grim. We're already dead if we stay out here. The subsystems roared to life on their own, pulling them slowly into the glowing maw of the alien structure. The crew sat frozen, the realization sinking in that they were no longer in control. As they crossed the threshold, the hum grew deafening, resonating through their very bones. The light engulfed them, and the last thing they saw before the world white was the shifting, unblinking glow of eyes watching from the shadows, revealing a chasm so vast it seemed to swallow the light from the sub's beams. The water within the opening was unnaturally still, an inky blackness that seemed alive, pulsing faintly with the rhythm of the glowing symbols on the structure. Marcus's voice trembled. We're not going in there. Tell me we're not going in there. Adrian's jaw tightened. We don't have a choice. It's pulling us in. The sub began to drift forward, slow but unstoppable. Marcus wrestled with the controls, his hands slippery with sweat. I'm trying! The systems aren't responding! Emily was transfixed by the glowing symbols on her monitor, her fingers moving unconsciously over the controls. It's not pulling us, it's guiding us. Adrian turned sharply toward her. Emily, stop! Don't let it control you! As she blinked, her hand freezing in midair as if snapping out of a trance. I don't know what I'm doing. It's like I'm connected to it. The sub crossed the threshold of the massive entrance. The water inside was colder, heavier, pressing against the walls of the vessel as if it were alive. The hum grew louder, resonating through the cabin and deep into their bones. Emily's voice was barely of a whisper. This isn't just a structure. It's alive. Inside, the chamber expanded, revealing an intricate network of tunnels and caverns. Strange, bioluminescent organisms clung to the walls, casting an eerie glow that shifted and pulsed like the beat of a heart. Adrian stared at the scene, his face pale but determined. We need to find a way out of this before it's too late. Marcus was on the verge of breaking, his breathing rapid and shallow. Out. Are you kidding me? We're in the belly of some alien nightmare, and you think there's a way out? Emily's eyes darted to her monitor. Wait, there's something moving ahead. Through the viewport, shadows began to materialize. They were humanoid but distorted, their forms fluid and shifting, as if they were made of the same inky blackness that filled the water. Their glowing eyes pierced the darkness. Fixed on the sub, Adrian's voice was calm but edged with steel. Brace yourselves. Whatever they are, they're coming for us. The figures moved with terrifying speed, converging on the sub. One slammed into the viewport, its face pressing against the glass. It had no mouth, but its glowing eyes radiated an intense, malevolent intelligence. Marcus screamed, falling out of his chair. Get it off! Get off! Emily frantically worked the controls, activating the sub's exterior lights. The sudden burst of light drove the creature back, its form dissipating like smoke. Adrian grabbed the fire extinguisher and braced himself near the hatch. They're testing us. They want to see if we'll fight back. Marcus glared at him, his fear boiling into anger. Fight back? With what? A flashlight and your lucky charm. The sub shuddered as more creatures slammed into it, their forms wrapping around the vessel like living shadows. The walls groaned under the pressure, cracks spidering across the viewport. Emily's voice was sharp. Adrian, we can't take much more of this. The hull's going to give! Adrian scanned the monitors, his mind racing. There has to be a power source. Something's controlling all of this. Emily pointed to the largest tunnel ahead, its walls lined with the glowing symbols that seemed to pulse faster now, as if beckoning them. There, that's the source. If we can disrupt it, maybe we can break free. Marcus was trembling, tears streaming down his face. And what if it kills us first? What if we don't make it? Adrian's voice was steady, almost defiant. Then we make sure they remember we fought. With a final bone-rattling lurch, the sub was dragged deeper into the tunnel, toward a massive, pulsating structure at its end. The glow intensified, bathing everything in a blinding light. Emily shielded her eyes, her voice trembling. It's not a machine. It's alive. The structure was a colossal, organic mass, its surface writhing with tendrils and pulsing with a sickly, greenish light. The symbols covering it seemed to flow like liquid, rearranging themselves into patterns that tugged at the edges of their minds. Adrian's voice was tight with urgency. Whatever it is, it's the heart of this place. We take it out, or we don't leave. The sub slowed to a halt, the systems coming back online with an eerie hum. The crew exchanged a look, their faces a mix of fear and determination. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. This is it. One way or another, it ends here. They prepared to exit the sub, their tools clutched tightly in trembling hands as they stepped into the heart of the alien nightmare. Behind them, the tunnel filled with the sound of slithering forms, closing in. And what if it's a trap? What if going toward it is exactly what it wants? Marcus's voice cracked, his panic echoing through the sub. Adrian fixed him with a steady gaze. Staying here isn't an option. If we don't do something now, we're dead. Pull yourself together, Marcus. Emily pushed the sub's propulsion systems to their limit, steering toward the pulsating tunnel. The creatures around them writhed in response, their forms shifting and twisting as if agitated by the decision. As they moved deeper into the tunnel, the glowing symbols on the walls grew brighter and more intricate, forming patterns that seemed to writhe and shift like living organisms. The hum had transformed into a low, resonant chant, filling the cabin with an almost hypnotic vibration. Marcus gripped his seat, his knuckles white. This isn't just a structure. It's some kind of ritual or machine. What if we're powering it by going deeper? Emily's gaze didn't waver from the controls. Then we have to stop it before it's fully charged. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a massive, dome-shaped chamber. In the center was an enormous, pulsating orb of light, suspended in the water by black tendrils that seemed to grow directly from the walls. The orb radiated a mesmerizing mix of colors, shifting between crimson, emerald, and deep violet. Adrian leaned forward, his voice hushed. That's it. That's the source. Emily's hands trembled as she adjusted the controls. It's beautiful and terrifying. Marcus muttered under his breath, almost to himself. It's alive. That thing is alive. Suddenly, the orb flared brightly, and the hum turned into a deafening roar. The water around the sub churned violently, throwing them against their seats. The creatures from before materialized again, but this time they weren't attacking. They were forming a circle around the orb, moving in a synchronized, almost reverent dance. Adrian shouted over the chaos. Emily! Can we fire a charge at it? Anything to disrupt whatever it's doing? Emily's fingers flew across the console. We've got a small torpedo, but it's not designed for something like that. If we're wrong, we could destroy ourselves along with it. Adrian's voice was firm. If we do nothing, we're already dead. Aim for the orb. Marcus grabbed Adrian's arm, desperation in his eyes. You're insane. That thing could wipe us out. We should retreat. Find another way. Adrian shook him off. There is no other way. Emily locked onto the orb, her hands steady despite the chaos around them, firing in 3, 2, 1. The torpedo shot forward, slicing through the water and slamming into the orb. For a moment, there was silence, a deafening, suffocating stillness. Then, the orb erupted. A blinding wave of light and energy burst from its center, throwing the sub backward. The creatures around the orb disintegrated, their forms dissolving into black mist. The walls of the chamber cracked and collapsed, sending massive chunks of debris crashing into the abyss. Inside the sub, alarms blared as systems failed one by one. Emily fought to stabilize their descent, her teeth gritted in concentration. We're losing power! Brace for impact! The sub spiraled downward, the once glowing symbols now dark and lifeless. The roar of the collapsing chamber faded, replaced by an eerie, oppressive silence. When the sub finally came to a halt, the crew sat in stunned silence, their breaths ragged. Adrian was the first to speak, his voice hoarse. Status report. Emily shook her head, her hands trembling. Minimal power. We're alive for now. Marcus looked out the viewport, his face pale. Where are we? Of outside, the sub was surrounded by darkness. The glowing symbols, the creatures, the orb, they were all gone. But in the distance, faint pinpricks of light began to appear, moving slowly toward them. Adrian's eyes narrowed. They're still here. The lights grew brighter, closer, revealing shapes that were larger, more menacing than anything they had seen before. Emily whispered, her voice trembling. This isn't over. The hum returned, louder and deeper, shaking the sub as the light surrounded them. The crew exchanged terrified glances, realizing that whatever they had disrupted, it had only awakened something far worse.